Well, on another edition of Right Angle this week, our friend Steve Green covered what appears to be the Democratic circular firing squad and took a look at what they're doing politically to make sure they never get elected for president. But I want to concentrate on a specific. I want to concentrate on something that was said by Beto O'Rourke. Is it Beta or Beto? It sounds like Beta. Here's the problem for Beto O'Rourke. He's been upstaged by Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg is smarter, more charming, more electable, all of that. And now Huckleberry Hound has got to get himself some attention. So that's exactly what he did. He stood up on the Democratic stage for the national debate and said, hell yes, we're going to come and take your guns from you. We're going to take your AR-15s. We're going to take your AK-47s. And the room erupted into thunderous applause. Now, this is the part I'm interested in. I'm not interested in the fact that he said it. I know why he said it. He said it because he's slipping and he needed some traction. But now, as Steve has pointed out, now that's a marker and now that's out there. I'm not going to deal with that either. Here's what I want to deal with. Not only to Beto O'Rourke, but also to the people who cheered and applauded that. I want to know what that looks like. Let's say that Beto is elected president. And let's just, for the sake of the argument, say that Beto decides by imperial decree that all of the guns in America, AK-47s and AR-15s, which are the most popular rifles in America, are suddenly not only illegal, but not only illegal and not only encouraged to be brought in, but we are going to take the guns away from people. That's what he said. It wasn't like we're going to set up a plan for them to turn them in. We're going to go and take them. So, Steve, let's start with you. Beto O'Rourke is saying this. He's using the mass shootings and the death of 20 or 30 people at a time, which is horrific, to gin up political support. But how many people do you suppose would be injured or killed if the police force, those of them that would be willing to do it, were given specific orders to go to people's houses and collect their weapons? What do you think the result of his policy would be?
Other than bloodshed, military law, and all the rest, I have no idea. I have no idea if you could get a majority of police officers, or if the worst came, the army, to follow an order to do that. They
wouldn't do it.
No, you're talking about people who swore an oath to uphold the Constitution, not an oath to uphold the word of somebody who looks like Bobby and drives like Ted. That's not how this country works. Excuse me. The idea of this, and at first he was talking about mandatory buybacks, which is just newspeak for confiscation with a little cash sweetener.
How can the government buy back a weapon that they never owned in the first place?
Well, exactly. It's not yours. I bought it. But let's just look at prohibition. We outlawed alcohol via constitutional amendment, which I think is what it would take to outlaw firearms in this country. Certainly broad swaths of them, like he's talking about. You do that. We did that in prohibition, and alcohol is weighty and it's bulky, and you have to have a continuous supply of it in order to meet demand, right? You can't just bring a truck into town at night and unload it.
You got to drink the beer every night. Yep, that's right.
Exactly. Firearms are built to last. At least the good ones are, and I've got some good ones. I don't have to buy a new pistol every night. I don't have to buy an AR-15 every night. Ooh, but what if I did? Anyway, sorry, I got lost in my own little dreamland there. You buy them once. You maintain them, and you get a lifetime out of them, and I'll hand them down to my kids someday. So we're not talking about something where you can close the border or whatever and cut off the flow of firearms. You can't do it. There are what's the number? It's 300 million firearms out there in 100 million households or whatever the figure is.
About that.
You just can't do it. I dig a hole in my backyard. I'll have a fishing accident or whatever other convenient excuse I can come up with. Or I get together with my neighbors, all of whom own firearms, and we play round robin with the cops. We're Americans. This is what we do. We ignore the stupid laws and we work together to do it. And this wouldn't even have the force of law. It's the force of ego of one idiot malcontent who somehow thinks he can obnoxious, that's a verb now, his way into the White House.
Scott, the thing that I'm interested in, and Steve touched on it too, is sometimes the best way to really understand how appalling an idea is to grant it. Just grant it. Let's just say that Beto has his way and all the people cheering have their way. There are hundreds of millions of Americans who legally own firearms, bought them legally. Suddenly they become felons with property that is forbidden, and the police are going to come and take them away. Put aside the fact that I agree with Steve and you that the police would never do that and that the army would never do that and so on. Let's just grant him his premise. How many people, how many law-abiding innocent American civilians and law-abiding innocent policemen would be killed if this kind of thing tried to happen to 300 million pieces of property?
You know, the federal government can't even get an accurate accounting of how much income people make who are subject to a federal income tax. I don't know what makes them think that something that people already treat as a very private thing beyond even their own income. It's like, who was that? What was Fred Thompson when he was running for president years ago, and they tried to get all the candidates on stage to raise their hand if they owned a firearm or something, and he said he wasn't raising his hand for that kind of thing. It's like we don't. I
miss him.
We don't. Yeah, we don't go around crowing about which firearms we own outside of our circle of trusted friends. And Steve's right. We would form networks of people to protect our interests. Now, when you think about it, though, to give Beto O'Rourke his premise, first of all, he says, hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15s and your AK-47s. Yeah, AR-15, I believe, the single most popular rifle in the country. And also responsible for very few gun-related deaths. Rifles, in fact, are not used very often for murder at all, compared to other things like knives or even strangulation by human hands.
There's tough to stick an AR-15 into your pocket or under your belt. Yes.
Yeah, it's hard to conceal. And so you've got that challenge right there, and the reluctance of people to give it up. You've got the fact that the federal government cannot control municipal police forces. We don't have a national police force, although many federal agencies have their own armed security wings, so to speak, but nowhere near enough manpower to be able to go and do this. We've had gun buybacks in some, left-governed cities where they announce they're going to do a big gun buyback, and people come and largely get rid of junk guns that they've had in the family that they don't really use, things that have been passed down to them by, grandpa who was a sportsman, but they're not. And they're just, they get a little bit of money for them. But the people who turn over guns in those situations, this isn't getting any murder weapons off the street. This is just getting, sort of guns that are laying fallow anyway and in disuse. And so the real guns that they're concerned about, in, Beto's case, if you want to really say he's concerned about AR-15s, well, it would have to be a very tiny percentage of guns that are already in the hands of madmen, of people who would engage in mass shooting incidents. So you're going to—
That's not what he was talking about.
No, he isn't.
Yeah.
So you're going to sweep the entire country in hopes of getting rid of a handful of guns that could be responsible for that. The American public, the American police agencies in cities, the American military would not get behind this. And so all of this to draw down to this point, that what Beto O'Rourke was doing, obviously a little showmanship there, trying to raise himself up into the sort of the lower middle tier of candidates, which he aspires to, is really the classic progressive position. We vocally and loudly declare that which we know to be impossible to achieve. And it makes us look good in doing it, even though we know we never will.
The virtue signaling aspect of it and the impossibility of it and the magical thinking of it are all things that need to be weighed into this. But the thing that I would like to concentrate on in closing is simply this. What does it say about a candidate for the presidency of the United States when he openly and enthusiastically says, I am going to declare tens of millions of Americans who are currently absolutely law-abiding citizens. I'm going to declare them illegal, and I am going to dispatch police to take property from them that was purchased legally by them. And I am fully aware of the fact that a large number of these people are going to resist, and it's going to result in a bloodbath, but that'll be red state people who will be killed. Don't worry. What does that tell you about that person? Worse than that, what does it tell you about a room full of people who burst into applause at the idea of sending young men to get killed, taking weapons from people who bought them legally, and suffering the consequences of that? And does anybody think that if you're ready to shoot up a high school and somebody says, well, better turn it in, or else you'll be in trouble. Well, God knows you don't want to be in trouble by not turning in your gun. So I'll go murder 60 people. This is an indication of how far the Democratic Party has fallen, is the fact that they are willing to weaponize the government against half of the population in order to withdraw the only thing that is protecting the entire American people from people like Beto O'Rourke. So that's why I've entitled this particular episode, "Okay, come and get him in person." You personally come and get him, Beto. Come and get him in person. Lowlife coward. That'll do it for this edition of Right Angle, brought to you by the Patriots who are members of BillWhittle.com. We usually close the shows by making a pitch for membership, but we don't want to do that. We've got more than enough members than we need. We don't think that you're good enough to be a member at BillWhittle.com. If you're not already a member, we think that it's not for you. Pretty exclusive club, really. And we're just looking for a few good men and women. And if 100 appeals haven't done that for you, then it's probably a club you just wish you could get into someday, but is pretty much close to you now. So, yeah. Going to work, Scott, or did I just blow my own foot off?
We're done.
I thought so too. Okay, well, anyway, that'll do it for this edition of Right Angle, brought to you by the paying members at BillWhittle.com. We'll see you next week.